In 1911, no one expected to find a city beneath the city. The workers were digging under Chicago when their tools struck something finished. A paved street, curbstones, doorways, with numbers still carved above them, and every number matched an address on the streets far overhead. Official history calls it a regrade, a raising of the ground after fire. But raised ground does not preserve a sealed, addressed grid intact for decades. That is not development, that is burial. And the men who paved over that street were never asked why the addresses already existed. But before we go down into that tunnel, we need to establish something, because this is not a ghost story. It is not about secret cities or lost worlds invented to thrill you. This is about a specific anomaly in the field record of one American city. A timing problem, a construction problem, a record problem. 3 separate categories of evidence that point to the same uncomfortable conclusion when you lay them side by side. Start with what the workers actually found. In 1911, crews excavating beneath the loop were not looking for history. They were building tunnels, the freight network that would move coal and goods under the streets. And in the course of that ordinary work, they broke into a space that was not supposed to be there. A street. Not a cellar, not a foundation, but a street, with a paved surface, a curb line, and the lower facades of buildings still standing along it. The detail that stops researchers cold is the addresses. The numbers carved and mounted above those buried doorways corresponded to the numbered grid of the streets overhead. The same sequence, the same logic. As though the city below and the city above were not 2 different places but one place, separated by a layer of fill that nobody could fully account for. You can move a population, you can rename a district, but you do not generate a matching address grid by accident 20 feet down in the dark. The official explanation is that Chicago raised itself, and this is documented to a point. In the 1850s and 1860s, the city did lift portions of its downtown out of the mud, jacking buildings upward and filling the streets beneath them to improve drainage. Engineers like George Pullman are credited with hoisting entire structures while business continued inside. It is a genuine piece of history. But the official version asks you to believe that this regrade explains everything that was later found below the surface, and when you examine the actual scale of what the tunnel crews described, the explanation begins to strain. Raising a street is one thing. Sealing a finished, addressed avenue beneath the new grade, intact, and then forgetting it existed, is another. The question that never gets a satisfying answer is simple. If the lower street was simply the old grade before the lift, why do its addresses match the modern numbering laid out afterward? Why does the buried layer look less like a muddy frontier road and more like a completed civic streetscape, with stonework finished at a level no one above ground would ever see again? Consider the timing as well. The Chicago we are taught to picture in the 1830s was a frontier settlement, a few hundred people clustered at the mouth of a river. 1880s, it was one of the largest, most heavily built cities on Earth, lined with monumental stone halls, columned banks, and railway terminals. That is roughly 50 years, half a century. The same compressed window that researchers point to again and again whenever they examine where the modern world supposedly came from. Not a few cities, nearly all of them, at one moment. And in that same window, the men who would own Chicago, the meat packers and railroad barons and bankers, appear with fortunes that arrive nearly fully formed. We will come back to them. For now, hold the contradiction in your hand. A finished street, addressed to match the city above it, buried under a layer of fill that the official record explains only halfway. The workers who found it in 1911 did not put it there. Someone did. And no one in the historical record was ever asked to explain why the addresses already existed before the city above them did. Go back to the fire, because that is where the official story plants its flag. In October 1871, the Great Chicago Fire burned for 3 days and leveled the heart of the city. Roughly 3.5 square miles. Around 300 dead, 100,000 left homeless. It is one of the most thoroughly recorded disasters of the 19th century, and it gives the rebuilt Chicago a clean origin point. Everything before is ash. Everything after is new. The fire is the eraser the official timeline needs. But fire burns upward and outward. It does not bury a street under 20 feet of fill and seal the doorways with their numbers intact. A fire leaves char, not a preserved avenue with finished stonework below grade. So the fire explains the rebuilding above the surface. It does not explain what the tunnel crews walked into beneath it. And the pattern does not stay underground. Walk the old districts of Chicago and other American cities built before 1880, and you find it above the surface too, if you know what you are looking for. Buildings whose first floors sit inexplicably below the level of the street. Door frames that begin underground. Window wells dug out after the fact. Lighting rooms that were clearly meant to be at ground level. And most telling of all, the ornamentation. The carved stone, the cornices, the decorative detail that should crown a building's public face appears at the level that is now a basement. Nobody decorates a foundation. Nobody carves a cornice for a wall they intend to bury. Researchers in this space have a name for the mechanism. They call it the mud flood. The phrase is crude, but the physical evidence behind it is not. The argument is straightforward. Entire ground floors across the northern hemisphere were buried in sediment, the grade raised, the lower stories converted into basements after the fact. The buildings did not sink. The ground rose around them. And the official record, when it acknowledges the buried levels at all, attributes them to deliberate regrading, to fires, to ordinary urban renewal, never to a single event that would have moved that much earth across that many cities in that compressed window. Chicago is not the only city with a street beneath the street. Seattle is the most publicly acknowledged example. After a fire in 1889, the official account says the city rebuilt 1 to 2 stories higher, leaving the original ground level intact below. You can take a guided tour of it today, walk the old sidewalks, stand in doorways that once opened onto the surface. The city presents it as a quirk of fire and rebuilding, but the structure is the same as Chicago's. A finished street, finished storefronts, sealed beneath the modern grade, with the official explanation always reaching for fire, always reaching for a regrade, never asking why the lower city was so complete before it was covered. Notice the rhythm of the explanations. A fire in Chicago, a fire in Seattle, a regrade here, a flood there, a rebuilding somewhere else. Each city gets its own local accident, and no one is supposed to step back and notice that the same buried, addressed, finished layer appears under city after city, each with a different cover story, all pointing at the same 30-year window. The infrastructure beneath these cities tells a different story than the infrastructure above them, and the men who would inherit the city above never had to explain the city below. They walked into a grid that was already drawn, already numbered, already finished, and they were handed the deeds to the surface while the lower streets stayed sealed in the dark, addressed and waiting, where the tunnel crews of 1911 would eventually find them. So who paved over it? Who held the deeds when the lower city went dark? The names are not mysterious. They are the names on the banks, the stockyards, the rail lines, and the museums. The men who built modern Chicago, the way the official record tells it, arrive in the second half of the 19th century with capital that is never fully explained, and they acquire the surface of a city whose foundations were already in place. They did not build the grid. They claimed it. They renamed it, repapered it, refinanced it, and then they funded the libraries and the historical societies that taught every subsequent generation that the city began with them. And there is a quieter anomaly that sits underneath all of it: the records themselves. Look closely at the genealogies of the families who appear in this era and at the civic registries of the towns that supposedly grew up around them, census records that begin rather than continue, church registries that start rather than resume, family trees that hit a wall in the same decades on both sides of the Atlantic, as though a clock was reset and the counting started over from a number nobody chose to explain. People do not simply appear, but in the record of this window again and again they do. There is a term for the role these families play. Custodians. Not architects. Custodians. A custodian does not need to know the full history of what he manages. He only needs the rules, the deeds, the templates, and the instruction to pass it all to the next generation intact. The self-made story serves the custodian perfectly. If people believe you built it, they never ask who built it before you. They never ask about the buried street. They never ask why the addresses already existed. And that may be the most important thing to understand about the city the tunnel crews opened in 1911. Its public history, the fire, the rebuilding, the frontier town that became a metropolis in 50 years is an administrative legend. A story constructed to explain the presence of a city that arrived too complete, too fast, into a record that had just been wiped clean. The real origin of that lower street is the same origin as the buildings that defy their construction timelines. The same origin as the ornamentation carved for a level no one was meant to see again. The same origin as the infrastructure that was already finished when the official settlers arrived to claim it. Chicago did not begin in 1871. It resumed. Under new management, with new deeds, new names carved over old addresses, and a fire to explain away everything that came before. That story is collapsing now. Not because of one buried street, but because of the weight of the pattern. The matching addresses, the ornamentation below grade, the cities with the same sealed layer and a different accident assigned to each. The fortunes that arrive fully formed in the same 30-year window. The records that begin instead of continue. Lay them side by side, and the official timeline stops holding the weight. The workers in 1911 found the answer to a question almost no one had thought to ask. They stood on a street that should not have been there, under a city that claimed to have built itself, reading addresses that matched the world above their heads. And the question, the one more and more researchers refuse to let go of, is not whether a city stood here before the one we were taught. The street answers that, paved and numbered, sealed in the dark. The question is who held the deeds when it went under, who decided which addresses would be buried and which would be